DNA. One thing that makes writing crime fiction these days much more difficult, and it's been getting more difficult for a while based on improved forensics, but now there are significant breakthroughs in DNA. And if you want to keep it credible, somehow you have to bring that into the equation, and it's difficult. If you want your reader to suspend disbelief and the story's a little wacky and it doesn't matter, that's fine. Then there's a readership that enjoys that type of story. But I like to try to keep it somewhat realistic. I don't want my characters to get away with stuff too easily that they wouldn't time after time in real life. And sometimes you do want your character to get away with something. In my case, I've got a vigilante justice guy. If he gets caught, then the series kind of falls apart. But in general, you want guilty people to sometimes get away with something for a while to maintain the suspense. And crime labs, even fairly recently, when they conducted DNA profiling, they were able to come up with 20 genetic markers. And now these private labs, such as Parabon and the people that tracked down the Golden State Killer recently, they can come up with 600,000 genetic markers for one sample. So somebody leaves blood at a crime scene or a hair from 30 years ago, and if they have that somehow preserved in some way and they can test it, they can come up with 600,000 genetic markers, and therefore they can they can link to a fourth or fifth or sixth cousin in the family tree. Then they're in the family tree, and then they're on their way through old-fashioned detective work. That's how they caught this guy, D'Angelo, the Golden State Killer. They linked to a fourth cousin, then I believe they found his great-great-great-grandfather somewhere, and then they're in the family tree, hundreds of people, thousands of people probably. They narrowed down to hundreds of men, the right age that could have been suspects, and then they keep going. But eventually they're gonna nail the person if they get in the family tree, and the family tree stands out because of all those genetic markers. So it's very difficult. So my character starts considering this. He starts reading the news and he considers this stuff, and he realizes he's leaving, whether he wants to or not, that unless you wear a hazmat suit, any killer is probably going to leave in today's forensic, with the sophistication of today's forensics, going to leave some trace at a crime scene that can be sampled and turned into a DNA profile. And he sees the writings on the wall. So he happens to actually get a ride from a trucker in one of the books. He breaks down in Arizona. The trucker gives him a ride. The trucker has a fair amount of wisdom. And the trucker suggests, why don't you stay one step ahead of law enforcement, get your own profile done, enter it in there the way they would, into this open source database where they caught the Golden State Killer and where they're now tracking many cold cases. And you see what shows up. See if you do have an unknown relative in there that you match to, where they would be able to track you. Find that out, and if you do find that relative, then get a hacker, find some underground hacker, and then hack that person out of there. Hack those people out of there that law enforcement would connect with. So it's a little bit goofy, but you're writing these things, you kind of have to think a little bit like a criminal. What would they try to do? And so I think my character is going to try to do that. He is going to try to get his own profile and see if he can, just for peace of mind, run it through these databases and see if law enforcement would find anything if they get around to running his own DNA in there. So he can at least sleep at night. If he can't sleep at night, then yeah, maybe act on the trucker's plan B and see if it's possible to actually hack the person out of there so law enforcement comes up empty when they run their search. But again, DNA, forensics, but DNA specifically is making crime fiction writing a little trickier. You have to kind of roll and adjust. Okay.